Hi everyone, welcome to the second video in the series of Judith, the Queen of Chess. In the series, we are looking at a few of the best games played by Judit Polgar. This game was played in the year 1991 and Judit Polgar was born in the year 1976. So if your maths is correct and you have watched the first video in the series carefully, you can guess what is so special about this game. Yes, Judith was 15 years old during this game, and after this game she received the title of Grandmaster at the age of 15 years 5 months, becoming the youngest chess player to receive the title, breaking the record of Bobby Fischer by a month. A huge achievement in her bag, isn't it? But there is a small catch. We are looking at the 9th round of Hungarian National Championship 1991, and right now Judith has 5 points out of 8. She needs only a draw to become a Grandmaster, but she needs to win this game in order to win the overall tournament. Receiving the Grandmaster title is quite an achievement in itself, especially when you are becoming the youngest Grandmaster. You got an opportunity to beat the record of one of the greatest players of all time, so why taking a risk? But as she tells, giving the checkmate is always fun. Suffice it to say that these individual mindsets in these kind of situations make the difference. So without considering anything else, she gave her best and went for a win. But it's not that easy, right? It's the last round of the tournament. She is facing Grandmaster Tibor Tolnai, the Hungarian Grandmaster, a very strong chess player, dodging all his threats one after the other and coming on top. Has she done it? Obviously she did. What do you expect? A suspense web series? But the point is that let us just enjoy the beautiful game, after which Judit Polgar became Grandmaster Judit Polgar and created a history. So without further delay, let us dive into the game. Tolnai is playing with the white pieces, Judith with the black pieces, and Tolnai begins the game with e4, the king's pawn opening. Judith here replies with c5, the Sicilian defense on the board. The idea is to prevent the immediate d4 push. So knight f3 by white, preparing to push d4, e6 by black, going for the e6 variation. This pawn is now defending the d5 and the f5 squares. Finally d4, cd, knight d, and we are looking at the open Sicilian, and white here goes for a6, the Sicilian Kun, or the Paulson variation if you may call it. Now if you look at the position right now on the board, white has a control over the center along with an outpost. But it may look like black lags in development. Also the d6 square is looking a little bit weak, but the point is that it's not possible for white to land any piece on this d6 square right now. At the same time, it's not possible for this knight to go forward into black's territory. The reason is that the pawns are doing a great job to defend the critical b5, d5 and the f5 squares. So that is the basic theory of Sicilian Kun. We cannot go deep into the theory, but that is the overall idea that we can understand. So the game continues with knight c3 going for development, queen c7. That is also a vital concept in many variations of Sicilian. This queen is right now defending the dark squares, at the same time putting pressure on this h2 pawn, and also defending the e5 square, preventing white to push e5 here. So the game continues with f4, preparing to push e5 here, b5 by black, with the idea of bringing the bishop on b7 and putting pressure on this e4 pawn. So bishop d3, going for development and also defending the e4 pawn. Bishop b7, and white here goes for queen f3, activating the queen, and probably white is going for a queenside castle. So knight f6 by black, going for development, bishop e3, and it's almost clear that white is going for a queenside castle here because white has created a room for the king on the queen side. Knight c6 developing, and finally white goes for the long side castle. And after looking at the king is on the king side, black will now try to bring all her pieces on queen side and build an attack on the king. So that is the basic idea. b4, black has started the attack, attacking the knight here. Knight c e2 and knight a5, bringing the pieces on the queen side. g4, now white is trying to build an attack on the king side. So d5, going for a center break, and e5 by white, closing the center, also attacking the knight here. But simply knight d7, black is interested in bringing the pieces on queen side, so there is nothing wrong in it. King b1, a prophylactic move, defending the a2 square here, and knight c4, attacking the king side. Now the point is that this bishop is very much powerful right now, and because of that this knight is looking very much strong on the c4 square. The idea is that right now it's not possible for white to exchange the knight for the bishop, because suppose bishop into c4 then d into c4, this bishop is doing a great job of defending the long a8 h1 diagonal, and there is a skewer over this long diagonal, so the queen is under attack. So after queen f1, bishop into h1, white is just losing the rook. So that's why this knight on c4 is very much strong, which is attacking the dark square bishop. So white here goes for bishop c1, defending the dark square bishop. It's a practice, like it's a part of theory that if white loses the dark square bishop so early in the game, it's almost it's not possible. It's almost very hard for white to win the game. However, black here goes for long side castle, looking at white is building an attack on the king side. Black decides to bring the king on the queen side where it can be very much safe. So h4, white is going according to the plan. Knight c5, now bringing the pieces on the queen side, and b3 trying to attack the knight here, and knight a3 check. The point is that again, if bishop captures, pawn captures, then this b2 square is a little bit weak because black is building an attack on the queen side. So this b2 square is very much vulnerable for white, and also white is losing the dark square bishop, in which white is not interested right now. So instead, white here goes for king a1, just saving the check, and f6 going for a king side break here. c3 now trying to get rid of this annoying b4 square, and after f into e5, f into e5, we are looking at knight c4. Now this knight is again coming back on c4, and again it is not possible for white to go for b into c4, d into c4 because of this discovery over this long a8 h1 diagonal. Suppose here white plays bishop e4, that is of no use because of this knight. So simply bishop into e4, white loses the bishop, and after queen e3, white loses the rook also. So this bishop is quite powerful piece for black, doing a lot of job for his army. So white here goes for knight e6, forking the rook and the queen, but instead of defending the pieces, black here goes for knight into e5, going for a counter attack and attacking the queen here. Suppose white here captures the queen, knight into c7, that's a little bit of mistake because black will simply go for knight into f3. Now this knight is under attack, this knight is not. So bishop f4 defending the knight here, knight into d3, rook into d3, d4, cd4, and knight e5. Now this knight is attacking the rook on d3. This bishop is now, there is a discover attack by the bishop on the rook on h1. So simply bishop into e5 and bishop into h1. Now white is losing the rook. So it's not possible for white to capture the queen here. So instead white decides to defend the queen, queen g3, and black here goes for knight into e6, bishop f5, pinning the knight. And suppose black here defends the knight with rook e8, then white can go for knight d4, queen into c3 check, queen into c3, b into c3, bishop into e6 check, king b8, bishop f4, bishop d6, and rook h e1. And it looks like white is now on the attacking side, right? Because the white pieces are suddenly so much active, and white is suddenly on an upper hand. So this line is not very much useful for black. So instead of going for defending the knight, black here simply defends the king with king b8, bishop into e6, and b into c3. So the game continues with knight into c3. The position is equal here, and d4 attacking the knight here. Instead of defending the knight here, white goes for rook hf1. The idea is that if pawn captures the knight, then white will go for rook into d8 check, queen into d8, queen into e5 check, bishop d6, queen c3, now winning a pawn here. Obviously black has queen into h4, queen d4 attacking the piece, queen g3 now, bishop f4, bishop into f4, queen into f4 check, queen into f4, rook into f4, and the position is completely equal here, and Judith is not going for a draw. So after rook hf1, instead of capturing the knight, obviously she is not interested in drawing, Judith here goes for bishop b4, putting pressure on this knight. Knight a4, now it's mandatory to save the knight here. Rook h e8 attacking the bishop, bishop f5 saving it. Bishop c6 now attacking the knight, bishop b2 activating the bishop on the long diagonal, g6 attacking the bishop, bishop a1. Black here goes for bishop into a4, b into a4. Bishop c3 now pinning the bishop. It's mandatory to capture the bishop here. Bishop into c3, queen into c3, check, queen into c3, d into c3. Now both the sides are entering an end game where black has a very good passer on the c file. And now the whole game will revolve around attacking and defending this c pawn. So let's see how the end game goes. White's plan will be now to bring the one rook to c1 and the other rook to f4, b4 and b3 and attack the c pawn. And whereas black will try to bring the rooks to the c file, c5 and bring the other rook to c8. So now let's see how both the sides are implementing their plans. Here white goes for rook c1 attacking the rook, rook c8 defending it, rook f4 as we have discussed earlier, rook c5 now, rook b4 check, king a7 and rook b3 double attacking the pawn. So the move is rook e8 and white here goes for bishop e8 weakening the b7 square. And the idea is that if suppose black goes for capturing the free pawn knight into g4, it will lead to a checkmate, rook b7 check, king a8 and simply rook b1. Now what's the idea of black here? Here nothing can be played for black because after the rook moves it's gonna be a checkmate. So suppose rook 8 c7, then simply rook into c7 check, rook c6 and bishop captures rook on c6, it's a checkmate. So that is the threat here. So it's not possible for black to capture the free pawn. Instead black here goes for rook 8 c7 defending the b7 square. So the game continues with rook c b1. Now white is trying to manipulate the weakness on the b7 square. Knight c6 now preventing the bishop to attack the b7 square. Bishop into c6. Now again if rook 7 captures c6, that's leading to a checkmate. Obviously rook b7. After king moves, rook b8 check, king a7 and rook b7 is checkmate. So the right move is rook 5 c6. Judit went for the right move here. Rook b4, rook c4, a3 and black here goes for rook into b4. Obviously if white goes for rook into b4, it's simply losing for black because c2, and now it's not possible for white to stop this pawn from queening. Suppose king b2, then simply c1 equals queen check, and after king moves it's gonna be a checkmate. After rook c2, rook comes and queen captures rook on b2, it's a checkmate. So the right move is a into b4. White goes, Tolnai goes for the right move here. Rook c4 now attacking the pawn, but it is well defended. So white here goes for h5 and a5 by black. Now the idea is that if white here goes for something like b5 or captures the pawn b into f5, then simply rook captures the pawn on a4 and it's a checkmate. So we can see that both the sides are just walking over a blade, a razor, right? And any kind of mistake will lead to an instant loss of the game. Okay, so however, instead of capturing the pawn here, white goes for h into g6, h into g6, and finally king a2. Black here plays rook into b4. Now if white captures the rook, rook into b4, then simply a into b4. Now again it is not possible for white to stop these pawns, also this pawn, from queening, because suppose king b3, then simply g5 is losing because white needs to do something. So the only option is king into b4 and then simply c2, king b3. It's not possible for the king to catch the pawn, and c1 equals queen. White is simply losing after this point. So it's not possible for white to capture the rook here. Instead white here goes for rook g1. At this point, white has understood that the position is almost losing for him and it's not possible for him to go for anything else. Like white here tries to go for rook g2 and attack the pawn on c2, but that's simply not possible. Here black goes for c2, If white rook goes to g2, then simply c1 equals queen. So obviously that is not an option. White rook cannot leave the first rank here. So the game continues with g5 by white and simply king b6, bringing the king on the side here. And after king comes on the king side, it's simply losing for white. So it is in this position on move 48, Grandmaster Tibor Tolnai resigns and Judit Polgar wins the game, at the same time winning the tournament with the point of 6 out of 9, getting the title of Grandmaster at the age of 15 years 4 months, breaking the record of Bobby Fischer. And now we are looking at Grandmaster Judit Polgar from now on. The rest of the games that we are going to look at in future in the series, we are going to look at we're not going to look at the games of Judit Polgar, rather we're going to look at the games of Grandmaster Judit Polgar. The idea is that why this is a winning position. Let us see. If suppose white goes for rook c1, then black can simply go for rook a4 check, king b3, rook b4 check, king c3 now, and simply black can go for king c5, rook into c2, rook c4 check. After king b2, rook captures rook, king into c2, and now it is not possible for white to defend both the pawns of black on the opposite sides. White tries to capture this pawn, black king will simply go for capturing this pawn and queen this pawn. And the idea is that after black goes to capture this pawn, if white king tries to defend this pawn, then black will simply queen this pawn. So that is the idea here. And with this, we are coming to the end of the game. We are now looking at the winning position for Grandmaster Judit Polgar, creating a history. And with this, we are coming to the end of the game, also end of the video. Now I am taking your leave. See you next time with the other exciting game of Judit Polgar in this series.